As a pro bike mechanic of over 30 years, I really couldn't tell you how many thousands of inner tubes I've had to replace in that time. What seems like a straightforward job is fraught with obstacles to make it harder for you to do. Fear not, I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years to make it easier for you to do and get you back on the road as soon as possible. You want to stick around to the end because these tips get dropped all the way through the video. At the very end, I'll show you how to make an inner tube as small as it was when it came out of the box, so you don't get your jersey dirty, or you can get it back into your bum bag. Not littering has never been easier. You've just got to become the bike. There are a few things you're going to need to get this job done successfully. You're going to need some tyre levers and maybe some sort of tool to get the wheel out of the bike if it's got nuts or a through axle. You're also going to need an inner tube, and obviously you'll need something to inflate it with, like a pump or a CO2 canister. Don't leave those at home. The first thing you want to do to make it easier to get the wheel in and out of the bike is put it in the two smallest cogs, the smallest at the front and the smallest at the rear. That way the wheel will just drop out when you undo it, and it'll also be easier to get back in because you can just put the chain onto the bottom cog, knowing which one it is, and it will just go straight back in the bike rather than you having to try and fight it. Once you've got the chain in the two smallest cogs, if you've got some sort of rim brake, you might want to release it right now. So if it's a caliper brake, there should be some sort of quick release on it. If it's cam pag, it'll be on the lever. If it's anything else, it should be on the caliper. And if it's a V brake, you just want to unhook the lead pipe from the actual linkage and open the brake up completely. So let's get the wheel out. You just want to unsecure it, whether that be quick release or some sort of bolt-on system. Hold onto the wheel and just let it drop out. If you're doing this on the side of the road, you might want to just lift the bike off the wheel. Almost all mass-produced bikes these days have little tangs on the bottom of the fork dropouts. And this is just like a safety precaution in case you don't really do your wheel up tight enough. So you will have to undo the skewer by screwing it open to allow the wheel to drop out and also to get it back in. With the wheel out of the bike, you want to remove any dust caps they might have or lock rings, and then you want to let all the air out of the tyre. And it doesn't really hurt to give the tyre a bit of a squish just to make sure it's all out. And if you've got a Presta valve, you want to just seal that back up so you don't let any more air back in. The next thing to do is to pinch the tyre and pull both sides towards each other so you push them in towards the centre of the rim. This will just crack the tyre bead off the hook on the rim, and it'll make it much easier to get off. It gets it into the middle of the wheel where it dips down a little bit usually, and that also makes the diameter of the rim where you're trying to get it off slightly smaller. Again, just making it easier. Get your tyre levers. I usually only use 2, but you might need 3 to do this. Sometimes I do as well. You want to get about 1/3 of the way around the wheel from the valve and get one of your tyre levers and get it underneath the tyre so that you can then hook it onto one of the outboard spokes. But before you do that, you want to get the other one next to it, maybe like 2, 3, 4 centimeters away, and then lever them both off at the same time. Now, if it's quite hard to get off like that, move the second tyre lever closer to the first one, because you might just end up snapping your tyre levers. And once you've levered the tyre off with the 2 levers, you want to just hook the first one onto a spoke, take the second one out and move to the other side of the first one, and then lever the tyre off there as well. And then just work your way back towards the valve until it's loose enough that you can actually get the tyre lever under the tyre and just slip it around the rim, getting the tyre off at the same time. You want to be doing this on the dish side of the wheel. So the wheel with the cogs on it, or if it's a front wheel and it's got a rotor, the side with the rotor on it. And the reason you want to do that is because it's the tighter side of the wheel, it's actually the smaller side of the wheel. So it is easier to get the tyre on and off of that side than it is off the other side. Once you've got the first side of the tyre off, you just want to work around somewhere like halfway around the wheel and start pulling the tube out. Now, if it's been in there for a long time, it might just be a bit sticky where the tube's stuck to the tyre, but you're just going to have to yank it out. And pull it all the way out until you get round to the valve, and then work back the other way from where you started and get back to the valve. And once you've got to there, you want to just pull the tyre back so you can actually see the valve or where the valve goes in, and just pull the valve out of the rim. Don't take the other side of the tyre off. Leave it on the wheel as it is, and there's a very good reason for that, which we'll get to in a minute. You want to keep your inner tube in the same plane as the wheel. Basically what I mean by that is if you were to put it back in, it would go in exactly the same way that it came out rather than turned around the other way. And then you want to start pumping your tyre up, and you can pump them up quite a way. A 700C tube will probably get about twice the size, both in diameter and its actual roundness, before it might burst. And this makes it much easier to find the hole, especially if there's a little one. Unless it's completely obvious where the hole is because you can hear the air coming out of it and find the hole straight away, what I do is I work my way around the tube, sort of holding it reasonably tight with each hand and pulling the tube tight so that it stretches the rubber out a little bit. That way if a little hole's there, it becomes much easier to find it. Once you've located the hole, You want to let the tube down so that it's flat and back to its normal size. And then you want to find where that is in relation to the valve. So in the case here of this puncture that we've got, it's nearly halfway around. So we know that that's where we got the puncture. So now we can go back to the tyre and find the spot where the hole in the tube is, and that's where our offending item will be. You don't want to just run your hands around the inside of the tyre, because if you do that, what will happen is at some point there'll be a piece of glass in there, or there'll be a thorn or something like that, and it'll be the worst paper cut you've ever got on the tip of your finger. Take it from me, I've done it a few times. Now that we've found the offending item, what we can do is either get a pick and try and get it out of the outside of the tyre, or if you're out on the road and you haven't got something like that, another way to do it is to get the tyre off the actual wheel and just use your tyre lever to push it out from the inside. Because the hole's on the outside of the tube, we know that the puncture's been made by something coming through the tyre tread. Now there are other ways to puncture inner tubes, but I'll cover those in another video. If you're finding value in this, please smash the like button down the bottom and share this with anyone you think would benefit from it. Once you're happy there's nothing left in the tyre, you can get one side of it back on the rim. Don't put the tube in it first because this makes it harder to get on. Just put one side of the tyre over the rim, and I like to make sure that the name lines up with the valve. It's just etiquette. Some tyres are directional, and it'll be on the sidewall if it is, and there'll be an arrow, and often it says rotation. That needs to go the way the wheel is spinning. Get your inner tube and just put enough air in it to make it go round. So it's basically the shape of what it would be inside the wheel. This will make it much easier to fit. It'll also make sure you don't get your tube caught underneath the tyre and risk it blowing off. The next thing you want to do is just pull the other side of the tyre back towards the side that's already on so you can see the valve hole. And then you just want to put the valve into the valve hole and pull that part of the tyre over the inner tube, and then just work your way around in one direction, tucking the inner tube into the tyre. Make sure it goes right up inside to where it's going to be once it's completely fitted. Once you've got all the way around the wheel to the valve and the tube's tucked right up into the tyre, you want to just start pulling the tyre with your fingers back onto the rim. And just go around slowly and follow one hand after the other so it doesn't start to run away from you the other way. Now work your way around, getting the tyre bead over on the rim, making sure the tyre's tucked in there as you go. I usually do this with one hand following the other. And there's a point where it gets a bit difficult when you're getting towards the end. And at that point, I like to turn the tyre around so that I can start pushing it on with my thumbs. Now what I do is I push it on with one thumb, the leading thumb, and then I just kind of hold it in place as it goes over with the other thumb. And I keep just shuffling along until I get there. Now if I can't get it on all the way like this, I go back to the other side of the valve where we started, where the tyre is already on, and I just kind of push the tyre away from myself and then hold it with the next hand. So with the first hand, I'm pushing the tyre away and holding it, and then my other hand is coming along and pinching the tyre behind it. So what we're trying to do here is gather up some tyre and work it all the way around the wheel so that we've got more to play with when we get back around near the valve where we're trying to get the final bit on. It's a little bit like trying to get a drawstring through a pair of swimmers with a safety pin. Hopefully once you've got all the way around there and the tyre's in effect bigger than it was in that position than it was before you started, you'll be able to get the tyre straight across the rim. Now if you can't do it, you should not use tyre levers. And if you're always having trouble getting tyres on, and some rim and tyre combinations are just a bad match, then there is a tool that you can get called a cool stop tyre jack. And that allows you to pull the tyre on without actually damaging the inner tube. The chances are if you use a tyre lever, no matter how careful you are, you will puncture the tube and then you're just back where you started. So have a bit of patience, and if you're really having trouble getting tyres on all the time, get one of these tools for yourself. It really is a great tool and a lifesaver. Now, there are many ways people tell you how to get the second side of the tyre on. The reason I start at the valve and finish at the valve is because it's foolproof in not getting the tube caught underneath the valve and then it just blowing off when you try and pump it up. It also helps you if you get around to the end and you can't quite get the tyre on. So if you're at that point, what you want to do is just let the air out of the tube, and because you're near the valve, and when you roll it on, the only chance of you getting the tube caught underneath the tyre is where the valve is. And all you need to do to sort that out is push the tube up inside the tyre to make sure the tube isn't underneath the bead anymore. Once you're happy that there's no tube caught underneath the tyre, and you can go around the rim and just check if you want all the way around just by pulling the tyre back and having a look, it's time to pump the tyre up. So you want to open the valve if it's a Presta and just fit your pump to it and pump away until it's up to the pressure that you need it to be. While you're pumping it up, you only want to go to about half the pressure, maybe 50 or 60 psi, and then just have a look around the rim and just make sure that the tyre's seating properly and it's not lifting off anywhere. The easiest way to do that is just to spin the wheel, because if there's any lumps or dips in it, they'll show themselves up quite quickly. Once you're happy with that, you just pump the tyre right up to the full pressure. But once it's there, I would still check again by spinning the wheel or just having a look around it, just to make sure that it's not lifting off anywhere. For a lot of people who've got Presta valves, the next thing to do is fit the lock ring and fit the valve cap. I don't like lock rings or valve caps on my inner tubes. They can both get tight and stuck on there, so when you get a puncture out on the road, they're hard to get off and just become a pain in the backside. And in the case of lock rings, if they come loose, they will just rattle. And who wants their bike to rattle? But the most important thing is, I like my bikes to be race ready. And why would I want to carry extra weight around? Lit ring's not cool, and you should be taking your tubes home with you. And the best thing to do with them is to open up the valve and then start on the other side of the tube, directly opposite the valve, and just start to roll it up. And as it starts to fill up with air, just let that out at the Presta valve, and then just keep going, and you'll end up with a nice flat tube. And then you want to just let that unroll, and then put the valve on the inside, and then just roll it back up like it came out of the box. If you're worried about the actual valve puncturing the tube, you can always use a dust cap for that. Aha moments? Leave them in the comments down below. Now you've successfully replaced your inner tube, you want to get your wheel and get it back in the bike. If it's the rear wheel, you just want to line up the smaller sprocket with the chain above it, and you may have to just pull the derailleur back a little bit so that the cogs can get past it, and just get it seated in the dropouts and secure it. That's just the opposite of how you took it out, depending on whether it's quick release or some sort of bolt-on system. And you just want to check that your wheel's in the middle, and you can do that just by putting your fingers in between the tyre or the rim and the seat stays or the forks, depending on which wheel it is. And if it feels right, like they're the same, then it probably is. Now, if you've got some sort of rim brake, you want to reconnect that or tighten up the quick release. And then the next thing I do is I shift the gears up to a gear that's easy to ride off in. I don't want to just ride off in the small, because that's quite a tough gear to just get going in, especially if you're on some sort of incline. Check out my other videos, subscribe and turn on notifications so you know when the new videos have dropped.